I don't know what happened, but I wasn't here when I was supposed to be here. Grace, peace, and welcome to Podcast of the Wills, the podcast that treats Star Wars like a sacred text. I am your host, Nick Milkey, and we have an amazing show tonight. I am so excited for this fun guest. It's somebody that I've been playing tag with for a little bit, trying to work it out, and it has been worth the wait. And I am guaranteeing that you're going to have fun tonight. You're going to laugh tonight, and you're going to do what we do best, which is talk about Star Wars. Before we get to Corey in just a minute, because I know a lot of you are here because you know who we're talking about. It's not a big surprise. I did want to do just a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, if you are new to Podcast of the Wills, we are a part of ATG Cast, and ATG Cast is made up of Podcast of the Wills and also my good buddy Pete from Around the Galaxy. And we both produce shows. Pete does a really awesome interview show where he talks to creators and content folks and lots of different cool folks in the Star Wars space. He has an amazing show. I have a pretty good show. I'm excited about, this partnership. We also do on Friday nights when there is new streaming Star Wars content on Disney Plus. We do streaming Star Wars. Pete and I on a Friday night, pouring up a whiskey, having a drink, and doing what we love to do, which is talk about Star Wars, talk about nerdy things. And then Pete also does what we call Disturbances in the Force, which is a 5-minute weekly Star Wars news roundup. No clickbait, no spin, just putting out the news, because what we know is there's tons of Star Wars. There's tons of new stuff coming our way. We've got a release date for the Obi-Wan Kenobi show has finally been announced, so we're waiting for May. And we know there's a lot more coming. Bad Batch, Ahsoka, Andor. We are living in kind of a golden era of Star Wars content, and we're very excited about that. So Pete has a great show every week where he kind of wraps up the news, the casting, whatever it is that's going on that week. So ATG Cast is something we want you to check out. You can follow us on social media at ATG Cast. You can go to atgcast.com to get more information. If you want to become a Patreon supporter, most of the time we record our short shows in front of a quote unquote live studio audience. If you're a Patreon supporter, you get to be a part of those live audiences, see the shows early, whether it's my show, whether it's his show. But tonight we opened it up to everybody. We wanted everybody a chance to get to hear this conversation with Corey and get to learn a little bit more about who we are and what we do. So if you're new here, thank you so much for being a part of the show tonight, for hanging out. I know we've got lots of friends hanging out in the live chat. I see Framey, I see Matthew, I see William, I see JD, I see Jeff. Lots of folks that are hanging out and being a part of this fun night tonight. So we're excited that you're here. And one other little housekeeping thing, because I would not be a YouTuber / content creator if I didn't try to push some merch on you. So as always, we have Podcast of the Wills t-shirts, stickers, all that kind of stuff. We have the Dad Batch t-shirt, which we made back during season 1 of the Clone Wars. Podcast of the Wills logos. There's several different ones of those. We have the Spark of Positivity shirt. I don't have it on the screen right now, but if you go to our TeePublic website or followwillspod.com to get there, there is actually a t-shirt that has a McRib sandwich wearing a Santa Claus hat. So if that's the kind of thing that you need in your life, if that's the kind of nonsense that you roll with, you can definitely go get that. And then also the other one that you see on the screen is Heroes of the Mom CU. And this is the podcast that I do with my wife and my 4 daughters, because my wife has never seen a Marvel movie in her life. She thought that Mighty Mouse and He-Man were a part of the Marvel universe. So my girls, who are obsessed with Marvel, we're making their mother watch all the movies in chronological order. And each time we do a movie, we do an episode about that, where we record before we see the movie to see what she thinks it's about. We watch the movie, and then we come in at the end and talk about what she really thought. The next one up is going to be Black Panther. So we've made our way, pretty far into the MCU. But we don't have that on yet. So that's coming up. So t-shirts, lots of things, any of it you need, any of it you don't need. We would love for you to check that out. But more importantly than that is the reason that we're here tonight. We're here tonight because I have a really fun guest. It is somebody that I have followed on social media for a while now. I find him insanely funny. He speaks the kind of comedy that I really appreciate, which is finding the humor in things that most of the time are just painful and truthful, because, there's unfortunately a lot of comedy in truth sometimes. And so, Corey Ryan Forrester through the Well-Read team with Trey and Drew. You know him. He's an author. He's a podcaster himself. They're touring. They're always doing tours. There's always lots of cool stuff going on. We're going to let him get into all of that. but I'm going to gladly welcome tonight our guest, Mr. Corey Ryan Forrester.
I'm one of those people who is a Star Wars fan. You know what I mean by that. I'm one of those Star Wars fans who likes Star Wars. It's very rare. It's a very rare thing.
Corey,
dude, y'all got a whole
up?
production going on here, brother. This is nice.
We are trying our best to represent in a way that makes us look like the kinds of nerds who spend our free time doing exactly a little bit more than we probably should have.
Well, if you have a podcast dedicated to Star Wars and then you lack on the nerd side of actually making the tech look good, I don't even know what you're doing here. So yeah, you're
That's
nailing
right.
it. This is good stuff.
Good.
Like, don't half nerd. You know what I mean? Full nerd.
That's right. You got to go full nerd every time. Well, and I can't take full credit because my buddy Pete, who is producing tonight and who I partnered with for ATG Cast, he is the graphics wizard. He makes us look good, and comes up with the videos and the logos and all that stuff. So definitely a shout out to Pete. But we're trying our best. You know, we're doing what we can. How are you, my friend?
Man, I'm doing good. And can I first let everyone know that I didn't get in the time machine and go back to the early 2000s and go to a Lane Bryant store in their what are the situations you know, at the front of furniture stores where they're like, this is what your house could look like.
That's right.
I'm at an Airbnb in Helen, Georgia. This isn't my normal setup. If I was at home, I'd have my Star Wars stuff around. So apologies for the lackluster performance here.
No apologies needed. And as we talked about before we got on camera, because you're in Helen, Georgia, we know that you have had the opportunity to spend some time with some quality German food and, you know, just go for the full German village in Georgia experience.
Let me tell you, I have cabbage still like sitting here. You know what I mean? Like it hadn't even made its way anywhere else. I'm just purple cabbage and bratwurst and schnitzeled. I'm schnitzeled out, my friend.
I love it. I love it. Well, we are very thankful that you're willing to come and hang out tonight and getting the opportunity to share with us a little bit about who you are and to talk about your Star Wars story. I know you came on my radar a couple years ago through Twitter, as we all, you know, tend to find each other through that glorious gift that is also one of our biggest curses, Twitter.
Yes.
I had seen
both wonderful
a video,
and the Sarlacc pit.
It is indeed the Sarlacc pit. That's an apt description. But I had seen a video that somebody had tweeted of this guy in what appeared to be, you know, the loft or office space in his house. And he was ranting about something which I related to. I related to the content of what you were saying, but being the nerd that I am, I also immediately keyed in on the fact that the framed art on the walls behind you were Han Solo. There was the Millennium Falcon. And I think also at that point, maybe your Twitter avatar was you with your head maybe photoshopped onto Han Solo when he's in that pose with the blaster.
Accurate.
So immediately I went, this is a person I want to talk to. And so I followed you on Twitter. I kind of kept up with what you've done over the last couple of years. And then a few months ago was kind of shot my shot, as the kids say, and said, I'm going to try and get this guy on because I'd love to hear, you know, first of all, as Southern guys, you grew up in Georgia. I'm in Alabama. You know, you don't always necessarily.
By the way, just gotta go ahead and.
It's fair as long as it's not that team from Tuscaloosa. I really don't. I'm not worried about it because I'm an Auburn fan.
There you go, baby.
But in those moments, I was like, I want to hear this guy's story. And of course, I appreciate your comedy and the things that I've seen from you. So this is a great honor to have you on. And where I'd like to start is before we get to Star Wars. Give us just kind of the background on Corey. Give us the 411 on who Corey Forrester is.
I mean, I'm a stand-up comedian. I've been doing. I'm glad that you asked that because, you know, as you said, you're like, oh, I found you on Twitter. A lot of people probably found me on Twitter. Oftentimes, people find me on Twitter and then see these other things I'm doing and are like, oh, this guy popped on Twitter and now he's doing all these other things. I am a stand-up comedian who is in my 18th year of doing stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
Started when I was 16, so, you know, a baby. Wanted to do it since I was 5. It's all I've ever been interested in. and also an author. You know, me and the boys wrote a book in 2016 called The Liberal Redneck Manifesto, Dragging Dixie Out of the Dark, which was something that I'd always, like, when I was a kid. I mean, like, I humble brag here, I
Yeah.
won the Young Authors Award when I was in second grade, but never necessarily thought like I'm going to be an author. But once I started doing stand up, I was like, well, you know, you got used to, when you did stand up like in the 80s and 90s, you could just tell jokes city to city all year and make a fine living. Nowadays, it seems that you have to have 9 things that you do. You have to
Right.
be a podcaster, you've got to have really good tweets, you know, yada, yada. So it was something I was interested in, but then, like, they just hit us out of nowhere with this book deal, completely changed my life. Got to buy a house, and for the first time in my, at that time, 12-year comedy career, I was full time, and yada yada yada. Here we are now.
Absolutely. Well, and I love that you said that, and I love thinking about, because I think you and I are probably of a similar age, that, like, and I know I've seen in your bio you talk about growing up watching Carson and, you know, seeing those things that inspired you. And I have always, while I am by no means a professional comedian, I have spent a lot of time watching comedians. I'm a same thing. I grew up with watching Carson. I say all the time, the sweet spot for me was in high school and college, when I could watch the Jon Stewart Daily Show at 10 o'clock.
Chappelle.
I could watch Letterman at 10:30 and Conan after Letterman, because
yeah,
like David Letterman is my spirit animal. Like, if I could be a grouchy old man, like, I want to be like David Letterman, minus that one kind of in between part that wasn't so great. But like, I love Conan.
Well, you know,
I love John.
What are you gonna do?
It happens. But I love Jon Stewart. I love Conan. Like, that's my comedy, and that's where. And so I listen to tons of comedy podcasts, and I pay attention to a lot of comedians and try to learn about what it is that you've done, like the grind that you have to go through, and the year. I mean, to do it for 18 years. You know, there's a story that you did your first set at 16, and you had to lie about your age in order to get in to do it. Like that's something that's amazing. Tell us about that.
It goes further than that too. It's I just wasn't able to fit into my entire bio. So yeah, I grew up in that sweet spot too. So it was like, you'd watch Jon Stewart, and then Chappelle's Show would come on, and then there was South Park, and then they had Crank Yankers, and they had Reno 911,
Yep.
and then I would watch, and Conan was my jam, because like Conan was late night. You weren't supposed to. Conan and Letterman are the two dudes who were literally doing viral videos before that was even a thing. Like, people don't understand, like, throwing a watermelon off of a roof sounds like something a TikToker would do now, and it be fresh and original. Letterman was doing that in the 80s. But so I lied. I had to, the club, it was an 18 and up club, but I wanted to perform really bad. And I had done this open, no, it wasn't an open. Here's my inauguration into stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
I had a blog on MySpace. Okay. I had a blog on MySpace. Both of those words are so old. And this dude named Ryan Reaper, shout out, I don't know if he's watching, but he's a good dude. He just happened to read my blog, and he messaged me one day. He's like, hey man, I run a comedy show at Amigos Mexican Restaurant in Hickson, Tennessee. And I was like, good for you. And he was like, would you ever want to come do a spot? And I was like, I mean, I want to be a stand-up comedian, but I wouldn't even know where to start. Like, I don't really have any jokes. And he goes, dude, I read your blog. Just say some of that stuff, you know, just say some of that. It'll be great. And I was too scared. And I was like, no, man, I don't think so. And he goes, how about this? I'll give you $100 to come host this comedy show. And I'm like, dude, are you kidding me? I'm 16 years old. At that time, $100 really was $100. Like, gas was 85 cents. You know, that was a lot of money. I enjoyed Percocets at the time. They were $3. So, you know, what are you going to do? Don't do those, kids. But so I go do it. And while I'm there, I meet this guy who was like headlining, and he was the booker for the open mic at the Comedy Catch. So he tells me to come through. I go to the Comedy Catch. He's telling me, he's like, by the way, it's 18 to get in. So like, you're going to have to lie at the front. I had my grandmother bring me. And that usually, like, when you've got an old lady with you, they don't normally like ID you. They're just like, oh yeah, he's all right. So they let me in. I do this set, and this is how stupid I am. In this, the first jokes that I'm writing, I ended up like kind of talking crap about how expensive the beers and stuff were at the place. Well, they didn't like that, you know. because I was like hurting their business. The bartender was the owner's mom. So she kicks me out. They tell me, you're never going to play in this club again. This is my first time at the only comedy club within several hours of me. I'm devastated. I literally cried. I was like, my comedy career is over the day that it started. So I talked to the booker again, and he goes, man, they really don't like you here. And I go, well, dude, I got to go on. He goes, okay. Have you ever did you ever watch the Gong Show? And I was like, I know what it is. And he goes, do you remember the unknown comic? And I was like, yeah, the guy with the bag over his head. He goes, just come back and wear a bag over your head. They'll never know it's you. And I'm like, okay. So I go back, and I'm so nervous to go in there that I just get stinking moonshine drunk before I go. I get in. I put this bag over my head. They announced me as the unknown comic. Now, this is also so long ago that you could still smoke in comedy clubs.
Right.
So I go up. I'm so drunk I have to sit down. I've got the bag over my head. I got a little mouth part cut out right here. And I put a cigarette in. I'm sitting down. I'm about to start telling my jokes. I lit the bag on fire. I lit the bag that was over my face on fire, and I have to run away. And I'm trying to put this thing out. And as I'm doing it, the owner's mom, who was the bartender who had kicked me out several weeks before, comes and grabs me by the ears and goes, I recognize you, you son of a bitch. You were the one that came in here talking about my beer prices. She drags me to the owner, explains the story. He looks at me. I've got ashes all over my face. He starts laughing, and he goes, you know what? We told you to never come back here again. But if you've got the balls to come back here with a bag over your head, you're welcome anytime. And then I was the house MC there for so many years.
That's absolutely amazing. And that's, that feels like that classic, you know, again, being guys of a certain age, like the classic Hollywood perseverance entertainment, like you did it. You did something bigger than just showing up, getting shot down. Like you went, no, I really want this. And I love that, because we live in, like you said, it's funny that really you hit in a time where you kind of got tagged as a Twitter star, or, you know, but like you've been working for it and grinding at it for a long time. And it started with doing something ballsy, like setting your head on fire inside a paper bag while you're drunk out of your mind.
Yeah, and for the record, I'm very thankful for Twitter and everybody who found me on Twitter. And I don't mean to disparage anyone who's like, oh, this guy blew up on Twitter. As long as you're a fan and you come to the show, I don't care what got you there. But in the comedy community, you know, of course, I've got my OG boys that like, I mean, I'm pretty well known in the comedy community, but like there are some comics who like that they will see my headshot, you know, on a coming attraction. They're like, oh, is that the guy from Twitter? And I just want to grab and be like, I've been doing this for 18 years.
Yeah.
But like
Twitter wasn't a thing when you started doing this.
It wasn't, dude. It wasn't like YouTube was like, Bo Burnham had just put his first video on YouTube. Like nobody knew to do any of that stuff. And that's what's been kind of difficult for me, because like I grew up like doing comedy starting in like 2004, 2005. All the dudes that I was doing comedy with were 50 years old. So I learned how to do comedy, but like from a very 80s perspective. So like during the pandemic, I literally had to be like, okay, how do regular age comedians do things? And now here I am.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's so neat. And I think that probably also adds to the quality of the comedy that you do. And like I said, I've watched, you know, a lot of the stuff that you do, and I just relate to it so much. But you can watch somebody do something and know, you know, oh, that's kind of funny. It's a little bit of flash in the pan. But then you can also watch somebody and go, that person's really talented, and that person has worked to develop and hone their craft. And I think that's apparent in what you do. And it goes in a lot of different ways. You do characters, you do political stuff, you do, you know, real life stuff. You grew up in the South, which is rife with comedy. Like, you know, it shows. And if nothing else, you've also showed that you can adapt, that you have figured out how to figure out Twitter, figure out YouTube, add in, you know, whatever the next social media thing is going to be. And I think that speaks a lot for the work and the talent that you have.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. It was worth it all just to hear that coming on this show. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is like, you have to adapt or you're dead in this business. And, you know, you see it all the time with like, I'm not going to mention any comedians by name, because I'm not in the business of disparaging people, and you know, everybody's got their own thing going. But you can see comedians of a certain age, even very popular ones, they basically hit a point and they're like, I'm not growing any further past this. This is the way things are done. And now that things are done differently, I don't do them, and fuck anybody that does them different. This ain't how it is.
Yeah.
And I just look at that now, and every day is like a battle to not be that guy, to just go, look, man, you got to understand that it is an ever changing, ever evolving business. Business and also life. Like, there are things that, like, yes, there are certain things you could say in the 80s and it was cool, and you can't say those things anymore. But it's not. I don't look at it as can't. I look at it as shouldn't. And also, you can say anything. Most of these dudes' specials now, I hear, is them going, man, you can't say anything anymore. And then they will, for the next 30 minutes, say all of those things.
Say all the things.
No, you're just saying that you can't so that you'll get people riled up. And then you say them and they go, look at this renegade. It's like, no, motherfucker, you can do whatever you want. Just that maybe you shouldn't, you know?
That's exactly right. You can say it. You just have to be prepared to deal with the fallout.
You just have to be prepared to deal with the consequences, man. And that's totally cool. But like, yeah, when I first started doing stand-up, like, it wasn't none of that. Like, it was just, dude, I'll be the first to tell you, like, I look back on some old jokes I did when I started out that, like, oh my God, I would never say that again. But not because I'm afraid to say it, but because I shouldn't say it.
Correct.
You know, like, we were just dude.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there was a school of comedy when I started who, like, you understand, when I was really first getting going, this is when, like, Louis C.K. had just set the precedent of, you have to put out a new special every year. Before that, it was, dude, comics would put out a special every 10 years. And Louis was like, nope, every year you do this material and then you throw it away. So it forced everybody to go, damn, we got to write way more. And also, we've got to be on the edge. You know, you've got to, so every joke that you would write back then was like, how can I say this thing that people don't want me to say, but get them to accept the fact that I said it and go, what a brilliant, the words that he put together made it okay, you know? And then at a certain point, you're like, I'm not even being myself. I just wanted to say a bad word, you know?
Right. You know, and sometimes that's what it takes. But I love that transitionally. And again, talking about age, talking about generation, something that I see, and we're about to start swinging into Star Wars. But like you said, that Louis C.K. thing, you've got to do a special a year. Like, the line started moving.
Man.
Well, but the line started moving. And I think what it probably did, if I'm to guess, is it pushed you. It made you work. It made you look for it, because it's one thing to go, okay, every 5 years I'm going to do something that'll be kind of funny. But like, that line keeps moving and creates more of a challenge. And I don't know, you know, in the limited creative things that I do, like, if I just sit back and just try to do that one thing, oh, that one person liked it, you know, that's fine. But if I don't push myself, you know, you get stagnant. And so I would hope that maybe part of that is it helps push you to continue to be a better comedian by going, well, crap, I've got to keep up. But it does, you're also figuring new stuff out.
Yeah, it does. But I think that Louis, like, when Louis did that and set that precedent, and first off, before I say this, let me preface all this by saying, very aware of what Louis did, and it's not a good thing. But that's not what we're talking about.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is, when Louis set that precedent, it was a good thing in the sense of it made everybody have to start working. But I personally think it kind of ruined comedy for a little bit, because now if you go to Netflix, there are 900 new specials that came out yesterday. Correct. The reason is because everybody thinks they have to put something out. And also what happens is a comedian will put out a special, and again, I'm not ever going to name names because these guys work really hard, and Lord knows everything I do isn't great, but you'll see a special and you go, man, that was pretty good. If they worked on it for 2 more years, it would be great. But they couldn't work on it for 2 more years because you got to put one out a year. Yeah. And so I think that Louis did for comedy what Steph Curry did for high school basketball. In that, I have a when Steph Curry came out and starts busting things from the half court line, I asked one of my buddies who coached high school basketball, I said, hey, what's been going on since Steph Curry? And he goes, dude, every single one of my kids just wants to pull up from half court, and I have to look at them and I have to go, you're not Steph Curry. He's an isolated generational talent. And again, regardless of all these stuff Louis would go on to do, Louis was an isolated generational, insane
Absolutely.
talent who he could put out one a year and then be great. But the average comedian cannot do that. But then they were forced to try to do it. And I think comedy went through a little bit of a right around that time.
Sure. Well, it created a false expectation. If I just do all
Sure.
these other things, then I'm going to be like him, and that's not how it works. Like,
No,
it
no,
just it's a
you're
challenge.
not going to be Louis. You're not going to be Larry David. You just need to start a podcast and shut the fuck up. You know?
That's right. Start churning out that weekly nonsense. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Well, let's do this because I love that story, and I'm such a sucker for process and behind the scenes. Like, I could talk to you for hours just about that kind of stuff. But
Sure.
we're here to talk about Star Wars, and you
Oh,
are
are we?
nothing
Oh, I
if
didn't
not.
know. Okay.
We are. I know it's a little bit of a turn at this point in the show. But you're a not notorious, that's the wrong word. You're a noted Star Wars fan. It's not a secret that you love Star Wars. Like I said, I said it says something when you have home decor, framed pictures on your wall at some place in your house of Star Wars. That's a certain level of fan, more than just, oh, I've seen that movie before. So do this for me. Tell us about your Star Wars origin story. When did you first see it? When did it first hit for you? Kind of give us the background on how you got into Star Wars.
You know, as me and you were talking off mic about how we're kind of in the golden age for Star Wars, you know, content, as much as I hate that word, but it is true. We are in that golden age, but like I was also at the precipice of another type of golden age that like the age that I was when they started re-releasing Star Wars in theaters, you know, and they did the remasters, which like now if you look back, you're like, George Lucas, why did you do this? That's, oh my God, you know. But like I didn't know any different. I was just a kid. Like I had seen him when I was a kid because like, you know, my dad graduated the same year that the first Star Wars came out. So like it was always a thing that got talked about. But when they re-released them and then like they did that sponsorship with like Pizza Hut, you know, like I remember it was this big deal, like the Pizza Hut, the cups, and oh my God, they're putting it in the theaters. And like these movies that like we had seen on like TNN or whatever as a kid, like you can actually go to the theaters and see these again. Right. And we did, and I immediately got the VHS and we wore them some bitches to the nub, boy. I mean, that was just it. So when I was a kid, like I was super into Star Wars and comic books and like Power Rangers and all sorts of like little nerdy stuff. And like there was a handful of my buddies that were, but a lot for the most part where I grew up, like everybody, you know, when we was kids was just like, no, man, baseball, trucks, that's it. And I like baseball and trucks. I mean, I was a 4-sport athlete for a while. I loved like, dude, you're not going to catch me during the NFL season. You're not going to catch me doing nothing but watching football. I get all that. Sure. But I was one of those like jocks who also could, when I was in high school, I talked to every single group of people. You know what I mean? Like there was the jocks who were, of course, my boys, but then I was like, yeah, but the band people are talking about Star Wars. So I'm going to go hang out with the flautist because they have some opinions on who shot first. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So,
absolutely. Yeah. No, and I think that's so great. And that's a lot of how, you know, I came to it in a lot of levels. Like I say it all the time on this show. And if it were a drinking game, everybody that watches this show would be dead. But I was born in 78. So I was born right after New Hope came out, which it wasn't called New Hope at the time. It was just Star Wars.
Star Wars, yeah.
But my dad was a science fiction guy. He was more Star Trek than Star Wars. But like I watched it and got it from him. And I had the same thing. We had the tapes where they were taped, I think, off HBO. But I remember Return of the Jedi was the first one I saw in the theater, but it was actually in the back of a station wagon at a drive-in in Central Illinois.
Oh, that's great.
And so like that was where I came to it because that was the right age. I was 5. It was Ewoks, you know, it was all the things that like spoke to a 5-year-old, but I had seen the other ones as well. And so then I go to, you know, kind of, we joke all the time about the dark time. You know, Star Wars, when I was in high school, it was the re-release of the special editions, like you said. And I read a bunch of the books. I read all the old, what we call now the EU novels, the original Thrawn trilogy, you know, some of that stuff. Like that was my Star Wars because I didn't think we were ever going to get a Star Wars again. And then in 1999, I'm halfway through college and we're like, oh, they're going to put out, you know, the prequels. And it became this whole thing. So it's such a neat place to be. And I love to say all the time, there has never been a time in my life where I didn't have Star Wars. And it's, of course, the same for you. It's always been there.
And I'm glad you brought up that time of the prequels. And I think this is one of those moments where our age difference probably tells a lot of the story here. So I think in that clip that you shared where I was saying, like, I'm one of those rare Star Wars fans that actually like Star Wars, I almost
Right.
want to think that was pulled from a larger conversation I was having about the prequels. But I always tell people that you have to, because like I'll have people who are like, 10, 15 years older than me, like, you like that shit? And I'm like, yes, but you have to understand, I was in fifth grade when those movies came out. They were
Right.
for me. And
Yes.
and so I watched them when I was fifth, sixth, eighth grade or whatever, and loved them. And there's something about nostalgia that, like, I can
Yes.
okay, Boondock Saints for instance, that movie.
Yep.
When I saw Boondock Saints at 18, that was the greatest goddamn movie that anyone had ever made. It was better than anything Scorsese had ever put out. Now, as someone who works in entertainment and script writing and stuff, I can watch that movie now and tell you from an objective standpoint, no, it is not a great movie. However, because I loved it when I was 18, I love it now. If I'd seen it now, I wouldn't like it the same way. If you'd have if I'd have watched the prequel for the first time today, garbage, get out of here. But I didn't.
Yeah.
I watched it when I was in fifth grade. And so to me, I can watch those movies all day, every day and love them. And people that are 15, 20 years older than me just don't get it, I guess.
Right. No, and that's such a great point, and I love that because I have had that conversation recently. A really good friend of mine, in fact, a guest of the show a couple of weeks ago, Matthew Turner, who's an author. I have said for a really long time, one of my all-time favorite shows. I like to use the Mount Rushmore metric, like what are the 4 shows that I watch, whatever. For a long time, Sopranos has been one of those shows. Sure. I have loved The Sopranos for years. But at the stage I am now as a father with 4 daughters, as, somebody who has people in my life who are gay, as people, I live in the South, as an ally to a lot of different groups of people, it's a very problematic show. And there's so much of it that it catches me in a point where I go, why do I like it as much as I do? Like, they're all homophobic, they're all racist, but I think nostalgia plays a part of that, because the point where I saw that show in my life, it was cutting edge and it was a big deal, but it's weird, like the way some of those things can sometimes age.
Well, let me defend you a little bit, because I too love The Sopranos, and I actually didn't watch it it came on also when I was a kid, and my parents would watch it, and I would just randomly see episodes, but I didn't really watch it all the way through.
Sure.
I didn't watch it all the way through until the pandemic, and I was like, there's all these shows that I've been saying for years I got to watch, and now I'm going to do it. Sopranos was one of them, and it holds up and it's great. And the reason that I think that is the show problematic? Sure, but at the same time, I almost want to say no, it's not, because yes, those people are homophobic and racist, but they're also villains. You know what I mean? It'd be one thing, like sometimes when you go back and you see a movie from the 80s, there will be racism and homophobia, but it's spoken from the perspective of the antagonist. And therefore it's problematic, because basically that was them saying, this is the good guy who's saying this. Whenever there's a movie where they make the antagonist say bad things, I'm like, yes, that's what antagonists do. They're racist and homophobic. Of course, the mob, because here's the thing. These guys are strangling innocent people. What do you think they think about gay rights?
Sure,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Wouldn't it be weird? Wouldn't it be weird if Tony Soprano choked someone out and was then like, let's go to an LGBT, hey, come on, let's go down to the LGBTQ thing. I was just wanting to support the kids. No, they're assholes. They're horrible.
That's right.
It's like they, when Django Unchained came out, they were like, man, they say the N-word a lot. I'm like, yeah, the plantation owners do. Because that's how they would have talked.
Because that's what it was.
Don't give the character a break by not letting them say the thing that they totally would have said.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and like I remember somebody saying that when Saving Private Ryan came out, and like all that opening 15 minutes where they're landing at Normandy, and they're like, yeah, there's a lot of language. I'm like, no shit, there's a lot of language. You're about to get shot on a beach in France. Like, I'd say the same thing.
You know what also is bad? War. And that's what the whole movie's about.
Turns out that's the thing. Yeah, and I think that's the thing. And I think with The Sopranos, for me, you're absolutely right. I came into it knowing it was a mob show. And I give David Chase credit for this and the writing. Like I always say, a part of the reason I think I stick to it so much is because of how well written it is. Tony Soprano and his crew are horrible people, and they do horrible
Exactly.
things. And like you said, they're choking people out with piano wires. But when you get to that episode in season 3 or 4, when the FBI is putting a lamp in his basement to bug and all that kind of stuff, I'm rooting for Tony, not rooting for
Of
the
course.
FBI, which is what I'm
That's
supposed to
true.
do. So,
Yeah.
it becomes that, that in between with the anti-hero, which is in its own,
Yeah.
at times can be problematic.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
I've
look,
gotten this.
I'm a straight white guy, so it's a hell of a thing for me to say. I'm just saying these were bad people. Of course, they say bad things. It would be
Right.
way like again back in the 70s and 80s, they would have leading men, white guys, great hair, who were supposed to be the heroes, saying horrible things. That doesn't look good. But Tony's not a good guy. We just rooted
That's
for
right.
him because this was so early on in the anti-hero type of TV show that we weren't used to it. In our mind, we're like, no, if you watch a TV show, you root for the main character. And we couldn't wrap our
Yeah.
brains around it. We have to go good versus bad. So for the first time ever, we were like, okay, mob guy, good, FBI, bad. Whereas like
Right.
normally it's the complete
Yeah.
opposite.
Well, and it also can, and that kind of set up the string of the other things we get. You get Walter White and Breaking Bad. You get,
Yeah.
all these things coming down the line. So what I've realized
And you know
just
what
in
it
this
started
little,
with, my friend? Stone
what's that?
Cold Steve Austin. He started it all. If it wasn't for
Yep.
Stone Cold Steve Austin blurring the line between heel and babyface, you never get Tony Soprano. You never get Breaking Bad. Thank you, WWF in
Well,
the 90s, for everything we have now.
and I'm so glad that you said that because, and we're just going to go because, we're hitting basically what I've realized at this moment in this conversation is I've already started laying plans for some sort of podcast where it's just Nick and Corey talking about TV shows. And,
Good.
there's a bunch of other places we could go with this, and I'm totally there for it. But something we didn't hit on in the intro is wrestling is a big thing for you. And of course, we have the persona of the Buttercream Dream, and we have the belt, and we have Skew. Like we have these other things, and we're going to come back to Star Wars. But you brought it up, so we have to go there for a minute with wrestling for you. And I grew up with like Junkyard Dog and Rowdy Piper and like 80s wrestling, that kind of thing. But like that's another fandom, and that's another area for you that is significant. And I think it plays into not only who you are as a creative person, but certainly as a fan of different things. What is that?
Dude,
how does that all bubble up and connect?
I mean, just with that, I mean, I'm probably as big of a wrestling fan as I am a Star Wars fan. And like when I was a kid, that was it, man. I mean, it was just
Yeah.
everything. And like, people ask me all the time, like, who are your biggest inspirations in comedy? And I'm always like, well, it's probably not the answers you would think. It's like Seinfeld, Mel Brooks, Bugs Bunny, and like, the hit, like Stone Cold Steve Austin. Like I learned how to perform from these guys too, because, and I'm friends with a lot of wrestlers, and like we have these conversations. Like there's not much difference in any type of performance. Like wrestlers, when they go into the ring, they're trying to do the exact same thing as a comedian is. They're trying to tell a story, they're trying to be charismatic, and they're trying to hit their time, and they're trying to get over with the crowd. And I just learned so much of my pizzazz from those guys. Like I've never been a dude who just stands behind the mic and tells a joke. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And frankly, I don't think my writing on stage is strong enough I'm not like Stephen Wright can stand there, tell a joke, and that's great. I'm not that guy. I'm a little more flashy. I kind of like to, when I'm on stage, I kind of work the ropes. You know what I mean? Like I'm here, I'm bouncing back here, because I'm like, that's how you keep people going. And so much of that when I was a kid was like watching Ric Flair. I watched Ric Flair promos, and I'm like, that right there is how you get people to pay attention to what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think that's it just connects. Like it's, the personality and, coming up with, who you are. The things that we did as kids informed who we are, who we turn into. You are a performer, no doubt about that. What is the origin of the Buttercream Dream? Because here's what I'm going to say.
It's
and I think
great.
I can't wait, and I'm excited to hear it. I have said to multiple people, friends, podcasters, personal friends, things. I'm like, oh yeah, this week I'm talking to Corey Ryan Forrester, and I know who you are, and I know both sides of it. But they're like, Corey Ryan, I don't know who that is. And then I'm like, Buttercream Dream, and like, oh yeah, I know. Like people
Oh man,
know
that makes me so happy.
one versus the other. So what is the origin of Buttercream Dream?
So the origin of the Buttercream Dream is a little twofold of a story. So I am one of my best friends in this entire world is Conrad Thompson, and Conrad Thompson is he's a podcast superstar at this point. He's basically, if you listen to wrestling podcasts, you listen to Conrad's wrestling podcast. He's also just happens to be Ric Flair's son-in-law. So
Okay.
me and Conrad have just been boys forever. Like honestly, right before he even started his podcast, we were just boys. And so he put me in this like group chat with him and all these like super wrestling fans who were like belt collectors. Like they're like, that's what they do. Like they collect belts
Sure.
like I collect shoes. So I'm in
Right.
the group but I'm not a belt collector. I'm not that guy. But I'm just a guy in there that's like, we talk wrestling and, we watch the pay-per-views and we just kind of hang out and, it's all a digital talking relationship. But one day there's a guy in there and his name's Pond Water Dave. And Pond Water Dave, he used to be he was an indie wrestling referee all throughout Mississippi. He reffed a lot of great matches. And he messaged me one day and he's like, hey, what's your address? And I didn't ask no questions. I just sent him my address. Well, about a week later, I go to my P.O. box and it was a real heavy box. And I'm like, damn, what is this? And I open it up and it's the European titles. It's the European Championship belt. And in it was a note from Pondwater Dave. And he said, I hated that you were the only one in the group that didn't have a belt. Here's your first one. Love you, Dave. And I'm like, man, this is great. And it's great. And I remember as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my God. Like I remember the Heartbreak Kid having this. Like I remember this belt. This is great. Well, so I've just got a belt. That's it.
Yeah.
I had this idea in my mind at one point that I wanted to do a series because I like to openly talk about depression and anxiety and mental illness because I suffer from it. And I think the one thing we don't do in this country enough is just talk about it as if it was any other thing. And so I wanted to do that. And so I had this idea in my head that was called Wrestling with My Emotions, where I was going to pretend to be this wrestling character who I did not know who that was going to be. And I was going to like cut depression was going to be my like villain. And every week I was going to have a match against depression and I was going to slowly talk it down. Well, then in my brain, I was like, well, that'll last about 2 weeks and then you'll run out of material. So I just kind of scrapped it. And then one day I was on the internet and I saw something that had pissed me off. And I'd never really made a video for the internet in my life, but it was the pandemic and I wasn't able to go on stage and get my thoughts out. So this was the only way. So I'm walking out of my house with my phone and I'm like, I'm going to say this, fuck all this shit. This is what I got to say. And as I'm walking out, the belt was sitting on top of my laundry machine. And just instinctively, I just grabbed it and put it over my shoulder. And I did this video and I didn't even address it. And I wasn't even in the Buttercream Dream character. But the video got like 1 million views and all the comments were like, I didn't even know what was going on. I just saw a wrestling belt and I had to click. And then it kind of clicked with me. I was like, dude, you remember when you was a kid and all you wanted to be was two things, a comedian or a wrestler? I think you can pretend to be a wrestler. I think you could do that. And then I was talking with my manager and I was like, what's a great name? And she was like, well, you love cheese. And I was like, okay. Dairy, butter. And she goes, the butter. And I go, I want to do something like Dusty Rhodes, The American Dream. And she goes, the butter dream. I go, the Buttercream Dream. It makes sense. And then I just started doing it. And dude, I'll be honest with you. And I tell Pondwater Dave this all the time. He changed my life because during the pandemic, I was forced off the road for 18 months, no income.
Sure.
But the Buttercream Dream happened and I made more money than I did the year before on tour.
It's wild. Like, and it's such a neat, it's such a neat, things. And you grew up in the South, so you know these things. Like you get what you get in the moment that you need it, and that's exactly what it was. And that's a very deep South Southern Christian kind of thing to come at. But like You
Yeah,
got
man.
what you need when you needed it. And whether it was the buttercream dream or whether it was potato salad at a church potluck, you got what you needed in the moment that you needed it. And I
You're
love
right.
that it just hit and you didn't have to force it and you didn't have to,
No.
you know, chase it. Like it just happened. And that's such an amazing.
Yeah, it was just very natural. Like it was basically I was like, you always wanted to be a wrestler. Clearly you can't do that because you're too old and you'll break your knee, but you can pretend to be one. And the thing you liked about him the most was when they talked. So just do that.
Mhm.
And since then I've gotten to be buddies with and I was honestly worried. I was like, man, I'm such a fan of wrestling. These guys, like actual wrestlers, are going to hate me. And that could not be further from the truth. Like I've been so fortunate. Like Sean Waltman loves my shit. Me and Dave Bautista got to be really good buddies because of the Buttercream Dream. And I
That's
talked to him and I was
amazing.
like, so none of this is offensive. He goes, no, man, when we watch that, you get it. Like
Right.
you get it. And I'm like, right. I'm not making fun. I'm just having fun, you
Mhm.
know?
That's right. And that has to be, again, as a kid who grew up with wrestling and as somebody who grew up like, you know, I listened to, you know, like you, I'm the nerd that also does the sports things, which is not the most common thing in the Star Wars world. But like,
Right.
I listen to Dan Patrick. My favorite currently and has been literally since I was in college is Tony Kornheiser from PTI. Like Tony Kornheiser is my other spirit animal besides David Letterman. He's a grouchy old man, but is sarcastic and funny and whatever. So
Yeah.
to get
Love him.
as
Mine
to,
is Stu Gatz and Dan Lebitard, but Stu Gatz is
and I know
also, you know,
so many people who love Levitard and Stugatz, and so that
great
perfectly
stuff.
tracks. Yeah. So, you know, one of the big clips that they used to run on the Dan Patrick show all the time was affirmation, baby. And that's just
Yeah.
it. You're getting that affirmation from, you know, these people that you respected and, you
Oh,
know,
it's great.
even the new current folks. So that's amazing. So let me do this. We're at 47 minutes in and we really still haven't gotten to the rest of our Star Wars talk. Are
Well,
we
we
good?
need to.
I don't want to take up your time, but are we okay?
Hey,
Are we good?
well, how about this? Can I run to this fridge over here and get a beer and then let's let it rip?
Absolutely. You can
You get,
totally
hey,
do
and
that.
by the way, I think I can still hear you and talk to you while I'm getting this beer.
Hey, we're just going to roll with it. It's totally fine. So Corey's going to get a beer, which is awesome because as soon as he gets back with that beer, and there he is, and he's making good beer
Boom.
selections, he's got Shiner Box. So we
Yes, I do.
know
Texas's finest.
that's right. That's right. The only thing we could maybe do better was if we got Lone Star, but it'd only be because we were watching Friday Night Lights. So, you know.
I love Lone Star and I love figuring out the little riddles underneath the caps. That's one of my favorite things.
Exactly. It's totally good. So we've covered a ton. We could go for hours and hours, but we do want to get to Star Wars. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to ask you one question, and then we're going to get to your top 7 list. So the
By the
question
way, do you have that list for me? Because I don't remember it.
I do. We're going to put it up on the screen. I'm going to say what it is, and then you're just going to go. You're going to talk about it. We're going to be ready.
Money.
So before we get to that top 7 list, the question I asked, because Podcast of the Wheels is the podcast that likes to treat Star Wars like a sacred text. We like to come at it from a pseudo Star Wars Bible study kind of move. As somebody who grew up in the Deep South, you totally connect and relate to that. So the question I love to ask my guests is, what is your Star Wars spiritual experience? And where the way I usually couch that is, what is a point where Star Wars was more than just a movie for you? It could be the first time you saw something. It could be, you know, an experience you had. Is there a time where Star Wars was bigger than just, oh, this is a fun movie? Like it hit you on a deeper level?
You know, it kind of gets into one of my top moments a little bit.
Okay.
There's sort of a crossover, and I can't remember where we landed on it, which one it was, but it was when I was a kid. You know, I told you that. You know, I watched all the re-releases, and I was a fan. And then they said like they're coming out with these prequels, and that blew
Right.
my mind for a couple of reasons. Number one, there's new Star Wars coming out. Because, like, to me at that time, I was like, yeah, Star Wars is this old thing and it's in the past. And I watched these old VHSs and that's it. And then it's like, there's going to be new Star Wars. I was freaking out. I was like, oh my God, I didn't know I didn't know that was possible. I didn't know you could do that. What are you talking about? And, and so there was that. And then I was just like right at the right age. And like, my buddy Matt, his brother was in high school and we were all in 5th and 6th grade. But like, you know, we hung out, we played football together. His brother was cool. and he was a Star Wars fan, huge Star Wars fan. And so he told us, he was like, "Hey guys, episode 1's coming out." And and this, it's so funny to think about this too, because like this is in the era before the internet and before Twitter and everything. But I still remember the promos being huge and it just being like this ubiquitous thing. Like Star Wars was all around us. The money they must have spent on if I could just have the money that they spent on the Star Wars campaign, you'd never have to do anything the rest of your life. It was just ubiquitous.
Absolutely.
And I see this Darth Maul, and I'm like, what the fuck is this guy? This because Darth Vader was the scariest thing that had ever happened to anybody, and this guy literally looks like the devil,
Correct.
So my buddy's brother tells us, he's like, "Hey man, the movie's premiering next Friday. I've already got tickets. I called the theater,
called on a telephone landline,
called him on a telephone, gave him my credit card, yada yada. I've got us tickets to the first show, and so like." We go and there's the line, there's people camped out, and but we've got the tickets and we stand out there, and I'm just like, it was at this moment that I was just like, oh, this is this. I watched this in my room. This is bigger than life. Like this is a thing, and these people are dressed up. And for the record, this is in Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, not like it'd be one thing to be in Los Angeles, but like people were freaking out. And it just felt like it was kind of one of those, like, we're all getting ready to go to church, experiences. And it's funny. I remember, and again, I know we're stepping on one of my top 7 lists, but I guess we can just skip that when we get to it.
It's totally fine.
I remember there was this dude, I do not mean to fat shame, but this a big old boy. Like he was a big son bitch. And he's sitting there, and we're in line, and he's telling us all this stuff about Star Wars, and he's giving us telling me things that I never would have even known what this was. And I remember thinking this guy was the coolest dude in the world. And it's so funny now that I look back on it, because I've seen this guy, working at the grocery store where he does since then. And not to disparage, but it's just like, yeah, that was just a nerd talking to some 5th graders. But like in my mind, it was like, this dude, he's a Jedi master. He knows shit. And it was just like being there and like being in that theater sold out, and like for the first time, watching a Star Wars movie with a group of people who it meant a lot to. And again, I didn't walk out of that theater hearing a bunch of old people going, "Well, that fucking sucked." It was just me and my buddies. And we were like, man, can you believe when he cut that sumbitch in half and he fell down that pipe? Oh my God, dude. So like that was it, man. And from then on, it was just like, this is my shit forever. I love this. And there's other people that like this too.
I love that. I love that so much. And I do have to tell this story. And again, I've told it on this podcast too many times, but you, as a Star Wars fan, as somebody who dealt with the prequels, will appreciate it. And I think you'll think it's funny. I was halfway through college in '99 when Phantom Menace came out, and I had a group of friends, like we were going to go see it. Midnight showings were still kind of a big thing. And so we were going to go to the theater here in Montgomery, and we were hanging out at a buddy of mine's house, waiting for midnight to get there. And it was like 10:10, 10:15, and we were watching the news. And on the news, there was this reporter doing a stand-up on site out in front of the movie theater close to where we were. And she was like, the hype is huge. Everybody's freaking out. There's lines. And like, they did a stand-up in front of the movie theater with the line of people behind them saying the excitement is palpable. Everybody's excited about this thing. And in that moment, we panicked. We're like, oh my God, like there's already people there in line at 10:15. We've got to get over there. We may not get a seat, whatever it was. So we all pile into the car, rush over to the theater. It's only a couple miles away. We get there only to discover they had staged a line for the news, for that news setup. Like we pulled up and there was nobody
the mainstream media and their
like,
hijinks.
They got 15 people to stand in a tight shot with the news anchor in front of it, talking about, a new Star Wars is coming out. And
sold some
so
tickets, baby.
We ended up going and, getting ice cream or killing another 45 minutes or an hour to get there. But it definitely also created that moment for me where like, that's when I saw Phantom Menace, was because of this dumb thing on the news.
Yep.
Well, that's great. And I love that as a spiritual moment. And I think that's absolutely it. Like, it was a big deal. It was something that hit you as more than
Huge.
just the movies you had watched as a kid. It was real. You were there. You're going to see it. Like, it was a thing. That's really amazing.
Dude, I hope that kids still feel that way about things now. Like, I know the world has changed and things are streaming and stuff like that, but like I really hope that kids have those moments because like that was really cool, you know, like that was
Mhm.
just all like you were just a part of society, but like this subculture of nerds and lunatics that all thought the same thing. Nothing else in the world mattered. Clinton Dole, none of that shit mattered, you know,
Nope,
at that
didn't matter.
moment. By God, we're going to see this red-faced menace take on Liam Neeson. What the fuck is going on here?
What actually is this? It's Neeson's and Obi-Wan Kenobi versus a devil man.
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, let's do this. Let's transition into your top 7 list, which has been a feature of this show outside of our canon study episodes. We've had guests on, and we pick a top 7 of some sort that relates to who they are, their Star Wars fandom. And for you, because I know you have a depth of Star Wars and you have a connection to it on a lot of levels, I wanted to give you kind of a broad range of things to talk about. So what we are going with tonight is we're going with Corey's top 7 Star Wars moments. And this covers a wide range of things. It could be stuff you've seen recently that you like. You've hit on just, we've hit a little bit of moments of things from your childhood. So we're going to jump in. I'm going to put each one up on the screen and you're going to tell us why it's one of your selections. It's pretty simple.
And I told you in the email that if you emailed me next week and asked me my top 7 moments, it's possible it'd be a completely different top 7.
Oh, and I wholly relate to that because I'm the same way. Like, I love all of Star Wars. I love Star Wars because it's Star Wars, but that doesn't mean, depending on the week I'm having, things I'm dealing with, one thing's going to hit me differently than something else does.
For sure.
So, jumping right in, your number 7 is the Ewok celebration on Endor in Return of the Jedi.
I mean, dude, it's just such a classic. I mean, not just Star Wars moment, Hollywood moment. It's such a tremendous scene. The score is amazing. It's the culmination of a wonderful trilogy. The Ewoks are so cute. Again, I know there's a lot of people, if you're a certain age, the Ewoks to you were the same as the prequels to some people, where it's like, oh, it jumped the shark. It was stupid. But to me, they're these cute little fucking Toto the dog looking some bitches out there stabbing people. Like, it's awesome. And like it was just a cool moment. And I too remember, like, you know, when now obviously they've gone back in and now it's Hayden Christensen, but they do the Force Ghost of like Darth Vader, and like that was so, I remember as a kid just being like, oh, that's spook. It's that moment when you go, oh my God, Darth Vader was a man. He had a life, and things go bad, but ultimately there's redemption. I thought it was just a wonderful, wonderful culmination to a pretty pitch perfect trilogy, in my opinion.
Without a doubt. And I say this all the time, like, Empire is my favorite because I'm that age and I'm that person that looks at Empire and goes, it feels like a perfect movie. There's so much that I love about it, especially as an adult. Last Jedi, because again, like you said, things change and we look at it differently than we did last week, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. Last Jedi, to me, a lot of times bumps up right behind Empire Strikes Back as my favorite Star Wars movie for a lot of the meta narrative, the storytelling, the one-to-one real world connections, that kind of stuff. But in these moments, I look at Return of the Jedi, and we just finished our Return of the Jedi canon study series, and I forget how much I love this movie because this was the first one that I saw in a theater, and it hit me as a 5-year-old with exactly what you said. Ewoks were cute. As a 5-year-old, of course I'm into teddy bears that'll kill people. That's awesome.
So great.
Yeah. It totally works. So that is a very admirable number 7 as we come into this list. So number 6, if we move on, very current, very real, Cad Bane versus Cobb Vanth in the Book of Boba Fett.
First off, my man Timothy Oliphant, I love so much that no matter what, this guy is playing a marshal. It don't matter what universe we're in. By God, if we're in Deadwood, he's a marshal. If he's in Justified, he's a marshal. And by the way, he's a space marshal now. I love it. And I love this scene specifically. Now so my buddy, I'm friends with W. Earl Brown, who you probably wouldn't
Yes.
recognize in the scene, but
Oh,
he plays the bartender.
yes, he
Yeah.
does.
So Earl plays the bartender in this, and it's great because it's a reunion of Deadwood,
Oh
them
my
two back
God.
together. But here's, yeah,
Just go
it
ahead,
was
but I'm freaking out
awesome.
because
And I remember
yeah,
when Earl. So here's a tiny inside story, if you don't mind.
yeah.
So Earl's been one of my best buddy. He's the first good buddy I made in Hollywood. We've been pals for 6 years. And when he first got this gig, of course he texts me because me and him talk about Star Wars all the time. Earl has he might not want me to tell this, but I don't give a shit. Earl pretty much has Earl can do what he wants. He's a big, great character actor in Hollywood. He's got kind of a clause that's like, I don't want to sit in a makeup chair for longer than 2 hours. I'm done with it. I'm old. I don't want to do that shit. So his manager calls him. She's like, I got you this part, but it's like, it's a lot of prosthetics. You're going to be in a makeup chair for like several hours. And Earl's like, and she goes, yeah. I knew you probably wouldn't want to do it. Anyways, it's Star Wars. And he goes, wait, what? Never mind. Fuck it. I'm in. So Earl's like, I'll do it. So he's texting me, he's filming all this stuff. And it was like, I'm not supposed to say much, but so the brutal nature of knowing somebody like Earl is that before the book of Boba Fett ever came out, I was having lunch with Earl at in Burbank, California, and he was telling me about the whole experience. And then he doesn't even realize he's doing it, but he's just ruining the show for me because he's just telling me all these things that are about to happen. He's like, dude, there was this scene, and I'm literally sitting there with a gun right next to Boba Fett, and then so and so dies, and blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, fuck. But I don't want to tell him to shut up because this is great stuff.
Right.
But luckily, that was several weeks before the show ever came out. I kind of forgot.
Sure.
But watching this scene, Earl had told me he'd set all this up, and he blocked it for me. And then when I saw it, I'm going, dude, Lucas always said that he was more inspired by Westerns and Kurosawa and all that. And yes, of course, it showed up in all the early movies, but they lean into it so hard here. And I mean, dude, fucking Cad Bane's literally got spurs. He's walking out and he's got his 6-shooters right here. As a kid who grew up watching The Rifleman with my dad and loving Westerns, and Tombstone's my second favorite movie of all time, this scene, I go, dude, if this is the future of Star Wars, we are in for such a treat. I want this Star Wars, I don't even want there to be any more movies. I want them to put all their focus on making serialized space Western 30-minute shows. That's all I want.
I do not disagree. And this only adds more fuel to what I said earlier, which is there needs to be some sort of Nick and Corey TV podcast, because as I talked about my Mount Rushmore of other TV shows, Justified and Deadwood are the other ones that are on that thing. And I am such a hardcore, oh my God, I've seen both of them, and Timothy Oliphant, by
the way, I bet you if Earl, I could probably talk Earl into doing this show. He would love it.
We're going to talk about that offline, because I have messaged him on social media trying to make that happen. But I mean, I'd lose my mind.
Listen, let me just tell him I had a good time. If he's not fucking in Canada doing one of his 1,000, he's playing he's working on a thing now. I don't know what it's even called, but he's playing George Wallace, the racist governor from Alabama.
Yeah,
in some movie.
I'm in Alabama, so we can make that work too. But so again, we could go on for hours and hours, but we have 5 more things on your list. So let's jump to your number 5. And I'll try to contain my excitement about W. Earl Brown. Dan Doherty, if you haven't watched Deadwood. Your number 5 is Maul cut in half in episode 1.
I mean, what more to say about this other than, in my opinion, this whole scene, this 15-minute whatever, is to me probably the best scene in all of Star Wars. It's the best fight, it's unbelievable. And a lot of this is coming from probably, I was a kid when I saw this, but that was the most badass shit I've ever seen. And to see him actually get cut in half, and the look on his face when he's like, oh, I've been cut in half. And then he falls backwards.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I don't know what else to say other than like visually, it's just great.
It's absolutely fantastic. And oh wait, hold on. We're jumping the boat
Spoiler.
here. There we go. Spoiler alert, Maul goes back to back, but that's okay. No, you're exactly right. And I remember when I saw this moment in that movie, and for what we've known for Star Wars and the age we grew up with Star Wars, like there is, the moment in Mos Eisley Cantina when Obi-Wan cuts off, what's his name's arm and it's bloody and it's on the floor. But for the most part, like it's not gory. It's not, and this isn't gory either, but a dude splits in half as he's falling down. Like that was a big moment for us
and
as
you
Star
can
Wars
tell
fans.
right there, like, oh, that's a mannequin. But
but it didn't
like,
even matter.
But it was intense. And also, like, what you have to understand is like the emotional roller coaster they've put you through. Because before this, we have just seen Qui-Gon Jinn die,
Right.
And so we don't really know. Of course, if you know anything about Star Wars, you go, well, Obi-Wan's not going to get killed. That's the problem with a prequel, is when there's a character that's fighting, you go, well, he's in the next movie, so therefore he's not going to die. But like,
Right.
I don't think anyone really expected Darth, and it's kind of a bummer because Darth Maul should have been in 2 and 3.
Yes,
they kind
correct.
of really did a disservice to the entire franchise by having Darth Maul, this absolute badass with a double lightsaber. Are you kidding me? Like,
right.
This was one of my favorite moments, but also, in my opinion, if we want to do a top 7 mistakes in the franchise, killing Darth Maul right here was a mistake. I mean, he's not killing him. I put that because of the next moment.
That's right. We're gonna get to number 4 in a minute, but you're exactly right. And the image, you said it earlier, talking about Darth Vader was the scariest thing we had seen in Star Wars until the Red Devil showed up in the trailers for the Phantom Menace. And I was in college in 99 or 98 whenever the trailer came out, and we had T1 internet access in our dorm room. And we still had to like wait for the trailer to download. Like that was a big thing, like downloading it off QuickTime, waiting for it to be fully downloaded so we could watch it. But when that trailer dropped
in 360p, brother,
360p, and those doors opened, and this red devil looking creature's here, and that lightsaber goes one side and then the other side. Like we all lost our minds. And
the John Williams score, John Williams, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The John Williams score there too. Like I could listen to that. That shit gets me so pumped up, man. Like
it's so
I could listen to that before I film a special and be like right in the right headspace.
That's right. That's right. You're ready to go. So coming on the heels of that, for number 4, we have another Maul moment. And I think this creates some great, as George Lucas likes to say, it's poetry. It rhymes. We get Darth Maul showing up in Solo, A Star Wars Story.
Yeah, man. And in this for me, it's like twofold. It's like, number one, I was so pleasantly surprised with Solo because they did a real disservice with, I think that Hollywood almost tried to bury that movie because it was like, Ron Howard had to come in and save the day. And we all know that Michael K. Williams was supposed to be in it, which is a huge bummer in hindsight that he wasn't. That would have been, because in my brain, I'm just like, oh my God, is it going to be like The Wire, but in space? This is awesome.
Yes.
And then there was all that stuff. And I think it just kind of put in people's mind, like, this movie is going to be a wreck, And then I see the movie and I think that, dude, it's so hard to cast a young Han Solo. And I think they nailed it. I think the dude pulled it off. I'd seen him in Hail Caesar before because I'm a huge Coen Brothers mark. And I was like, no, I think this guy can pull it off. I saw him play like kind of a dumb cowboy. I think he can get it. And he did. And so I was already in a great mindset during this movie. I was having so much fun. Chewie stuff was fun. And then this happened. And when this happened, I was like in 5th grade again. It was like, boom, oh my God. The greatest villain that never was, the Marcus Dupree of Star Wars, is here. And holy shit, what does this mean going forward?
No, it's huge. And for Star Wars fans like you and me, it was one of those moments where like excited because like Clone Wars existed and we knew that he survived and we knew there were all these other things.
See, I hadn't watched Clone Wars at that point yet. I hadn't. Like,
oh, okay.
So
for you, this was an absolute reveal.
this was an absolute reveal. And then I was immediately told, like, no, it's a thing. But like, I hadn't watched Clone Wars yet because I was just like, I had dropped off from watching a lot of things because we were on the road so much.
Sure.
That's why I started watching Clone Wars, was because
Okay.
someone was like, hey, and I'm not too deep in it for the record, but like this came out of 100% left field for me. It blew my mind.
That's amazing. And that's what's so much fun about it. And I'm similar to you, and I say this all the time too. For me, Clone Wars, I was at that right age. Like, I was out of college, I was married, I was having kids. Like, I knew there was a Star Wars cartoon. I had seen bits and pieces of it, but it didn't grab me the way Star Wars normally did because I had other shit to deal with. I had other things going on. And so what really drew me in, especially with Star Wars animation, is Star Wars Rebels. I love Star Wars Rebels in a way that sometimes it's hard to communicate.
Too. Yeah.
It's so good. But what that did for me is I started treating Clone Wars like a reference book. I would go back to certain parts of Clone Wars to figure out, what is the Mortis thing? What is the Darksaber thing? What is, you know, Cad Bane or Maul or whatever it was. But it created this bigger picture. And I knew Maul that had survived when I saw this in Solo. But again, same thing. I just went, oh, that's fantastic. And of course, I love that they have to bring in the moment where he calls the lightsaber to him and he ignites it. Just in case you weren't sure that was the same red-faced devil horn guy.
Yeah,
here's the devil lightsaber to cement it for you.
I mean, look at this GIF right here. How badass is that, man?
It's legit. And like, even now, I'm a little bit scared.
I'm probably going to watch Solo whenever we stop this podcast, if I'm being honest with you.
As well, you should. It is a there's a part of me, and again, sucker for story, a sucker for background and that kind of stuff. Like, I would really love to see that Lord and Miller cut of this movie and see how it showed up, you know, comedy wise and the humor and the things that they do. But you also have, you know, freaking Ron Howard, who has been all of our childhoods and all of our other things. And it's a fun movie, and that's what Star Wars is supposed to be. To come back to the intro clip we brought you in with, which is, I'm a Star Wars fan who likes Star Wars. It's very rare.
Yeah. I mean, if you made me the president of Star Wars right now, the first thing I would implement is no more trilogies ever. We're never doing it again.
Yep.
It's going to be exclusive one-shots like this. We're going to do stories. I want to see this for Yoda. I want to see this for Qui-Gon Jinn. Don't cast Liam Neeson. Cast Young. I want to just do this. You've got so much stuff here that everybody already likes. Just do that and just squeeze that turnip till it's bloody as hell. And then we'll think about if you get a good idea for a trilogy, then do it. But we've all seen what happens when you don't have that good of an idea for one.
Or you try to have 4 people put together a trilogy, whatever it is. But
you can't. Yeah. We got to have a cohesive thing.
And I think you said that earlier, talking about, you know, with Cad Bane and with Book of Boba Fett and Mandalorian and that kind of stuff. I love what you said. One-shot movies and serialized Disney Plus stuff. Like, that's the way to go.
Yes. There's so many of those movies that if you made them an 8-part series would have been so much better.
Yeah, without a doubt. Give it time to breathe. That was one of my biggest frustrations with Rise of Skywalker, is I felt like they should have done what they did with the last Harry Potter movie. Make it 2 movies and give it room to spread out the things that they tried to cram into this one last movie, because Star Wars has always been trilogy. So let's let it be 2 trilogies and 4, you know, whatever.
Could not agree more. Could not agree more.
All right, so let's keep going. Number 3, we're heading in a great direction. Your number 3 is Darth Vader in Rogue One. Speaking of one-shots, talk about badass. I mean, go.
Unreal. And this is another one of those moments where you're watching a movie that has nothing to do with this specific character, just like Darth Maul and Solo, and then they come at, well, not that Rogue One has nothing to do with Vader. Obviously, we know the whole story does, but like you were not thinking that this was going to happen. And I'm also very fortunate in that I have a rule with Star Wars movies and Marvel movies that I have to see them. My wife's back here just going like, yes, I know your rule. I have to see them either on opening night or the next day at the matinee, because I don't want any of my buddies to text and be like, yo, did you see Vader fuck them dudes up? Because they will, you know. So
Yep,
I,
it'll
I saw
happen.
this movie. I saw this movie opening night. And that's another thing too, is like when you see these movies in a crowded space and you get the energy of the people, when this shit happens, son, I mean, it was like watching Muhammad Ali walk in to fight. Like
Yep.
everyone lost their shit. It was awesome. And then also it's like this is the Vader. When we were kids, we saw Vader, but the technology wasn't there to make him that big of a badass. And then we were told our
Hmm.
whole lives how big of a badass he was. We finally got to see exactly how big of a badass he
Absolutely.
truly was because technology finally met storyline. And
Yes.
I could watch this scene all day, every day.
Oh, and that's exactly the point about what we heard about Darth Vader is the same thing with Boba Fett. And that's where I've been over the course of the series of Book of Boba Fett. Like, I grew up, Boba Fett was cool, but I was never obsessed with Boba Fett. But we knew he was the baddest bounty hunter in the galaxy.
Right.
But we get him for 6 minutes in the original trilogy. He has, however many lines, and he dies because Han Solo, who's blind, bumps into his jetpack and he falls into the Sarlacc. So when he showed up in season 2 of The Mandalorian, even without his armor, and he smokes all these stormtroopers with a gaffy stick,
Amazing.
you're like, oh, that's what we had always been
Exactly.
told. Same thing with Vader.
Exactly. Yes. We're
Exactly the same
now
thing with
seeing the
Vader.
badass we were told. They're finally showing instead of telling.
Yep. And it just, and this movie is a perfect example of that. Not to mention, it's just a great standalone movie. It's a great war movie. It's a great, everything about it is fantastic. But yes, these
Hey, can I
moments
run and
we
get
get
another
him.
beer real quick?
Please go get another beer.
2 seconds. 2 seconds. I'm sorry, everybody.
That's exactly. If there's anything that is a product of this podcast, is a chance to have a good drink and hang out and talk about Star Wars, we're totally on brand. So
All right. It
you're
was
good to
quick.
go. No, it was perfect. So yeah, I'm with you on Rogue One, and Rogue One stands alone on its own. But again, it also speaks to your point about standalones and serialized TV things. Like, this is such a great standalone.
And you got to give them so much credit because it's like I said with the problem with the prequel is like, well, you know what's going to happen because the story goes on. This is a movie where every single motherfucker watching it goes, well, I mean, they die. You know,
Exactly.
I know why there was a Rogue too, but it still played like it was just so great, man. I want nothing but this for the rest of my life.
Oh, I'm completely with you. And I love the idea of, one-off movies tell us some things. I do like this comment from Michael, one of our listeners or viewers tonight. He says, I need Corey to write a hillbilly elegy version of Star Wars like the Star Wars Shakespeare books.
Well, let me tell you something right now. Here's me doing a shameless plug. I
Do it.
have a subscription blog that you can find at CoreyWritesForYou.com, and I have been doing like I just did a couple weeks ago. I did a summary of Gone with the Wind from my perspective this week because it was however many years ago Huckleberry Finn was released.
Uh-huh.
I did a summary of Huckleberry Finn. Now that you've said this, I will 100% on CoreyWritesForYou.com start doing Star Wars summaries if you subscribe.
Yep.
I will do
There you
that.
go.
That sounds fun.
That's right. And we'll get back to that in plugs at the end. We're going to get everybody signed up for that. But yeah, we're going to get some Corey Wright's Star Wars. So we finish up with number 3. Vader and Rogue One is a fantastic choice. Your number 2 on this top 7 list is Chewie when Han dies in The Force Awakens.
Hardest I've ever laughed at Star Wars. Yeah, I didn't want to tell you in the email. I was almost put in parentheses. By the way, this is for comedy value, but I didn't want to give it
It's
away.
okay. It totally
Dude,
works.
So I know that I said, I'm one of those rare Star Wars fans that like Star Wars. I'm not the biggest fan of the last 3 movies. Now I
Sure.
still enjoy them fine. They're not
Yeah.
ones that I want to like rewatch and stuff. But me and my buddies, I was watching this movie with like it was me and like 7 or 8 comedians. We were in Nashville, Tennessee. We were doing shows and we it was like I guess it premiered on like a Friday or something, and we got high as balls and went to see Star Wars. And when this moment came and Han dies and Chewie just hits it with the I fell out of my chair laughing so hard, and I still think about that so much because, like, it is a genuine response, and that's how Chewie grieves. But
Sure.
it's just isolated. It was just such a funny moment.
Without a doubt, I totally see it from that perspective. And honestly, when you sent it to me, because I knew you were a comedian, there was a part of me that was like, "There's some humor in this. It's not strictly like, oh, I was really emotionally touched by the fact that Han Solo died." It was like camp, which is not unfamiliar for Star Wars. Star Wars is nothing if not campy on a lot of levels. So it totally clicked and
Yeah.
made sense.
No, it was great.
That I love that. I love that so much. So that one's pretty straightforward. We really don't have to dig into it. There's not a
Yeah, I
lot of
mean, that's it,
unpacking there.
man. I
Like,
just thought it was
yeah,
funny.
no, and it is.
The,
So
and by the way, I almost put on here. This is my honorable mention. Is
yeah,
in Rise of Skywalker when how do you say Brendan Gleeson's son's name? Domhnall
um,
Gleeson
yeah,
or whatever.
Donald Gleason.
Yeah,
It's like
whenever
Donald without the D, I think.
right when he when he comes up at the end and goes, "I am the spy." That cracked me up
Exactly.
so hard because we were
Yep.
just like, did they know how funny this was going to be, or did
Yeah.
they really just think, let's write this moment in here? But like that was my like honorable mention favorite. But I would decide to go with Chewie.
I love that, and I do think that there had to have been at least one comedy forward person in the room that was like, "No, we should totally do that." Like,
Yeah, I
it's
agree.
the same way. It's the same way you get in Force Awakens, Poe Dameron making like your mama jokes to,
Oh, it's great. Oscar
he's
Isaac was
tooling
so
with you.
underutilized in that role. Like he was so
Yeah.
great, man. That's another limited series for Disney Plus that
Yep.
would be great.
Absolutely. Give us some more Poe Dameron. So your number one is waiting in line for episode 1, Waiting for the Phantom Menace. We've hit on this a little bit, but set the scene for us, set it up, and why this becomes kind of your number one thing.
I mean, again, dude, I'm at the perfect age. I'm 5th grade. The promos have been crazy. We've got the Pizza Hut cups. It's me and all my buddies, all my weird little stinky buddies that love Star Wars. We've got his older brother who now looking back is, he's an all right guy, but he definitely wasn't as cool as we thought he was. He was the coolest dude in the world at that moment. We're going to see this. We're talking, me and my friends love Star Wars so much. We would alternate on the trampoline between being wrestlers. So we would be on the trampoline and we would wrestle each other and like we would figure out how to do stone cold stunners and stuff. And then half the day we would go get broomsticks and paint them green and red and fight each other Star Wars style. We could not be more immersed in this. We could not be more pumped. And now, for the first time, even though we've seen the re-release and we've all seen Star Wars, for the first time, we're about to see Star Wars for the first time with everybody else. No one else knows what's going on. We're seeing it brand new for the first time. We go to the theater, it's sold out. It's just an experience that, like, I remember I had a similar experience when I saw Avengers in 2012. It just felt like a big moment, like, oh, it's nerdy to say, but like, in that moment, I'm a part of a cultural phenomenon. And everyone's going to remember this experience. And as divided as we are in the country constantly, this moment is cool for everyone. I don't know. The guy standing beside me getting his Diet Dr. Pepper, I don't know what he thinks. We might be diametrically opposed on everything. But in this moment, all we know is that Star Wars is about to happen. And that was the first time I ever got to experience anything like that. I'd seen the Titanic with my parents. That was a big movie, but it wasn't like this. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is the first time I saw a movie and was not only seeing a movie, but was a part of something bigger than myself, which felt very religious, as I said earlier.
And I think that speaks to something that I connect with. I love that you compared it to like Avengers and Endgame. Like, I have 4 daughters. I have 2 twins that are 13, almost 14, a 9-year-old, a 5-year-old. Like, going to see the movie with them, and they're like losing their minds in that big hero moment when everybody comes out at the end. Or we went to see Spider-Man Far From Home a couple months ago, and when the other Peters show up, like, even for in a theater, like, and that's just it.
Dude,
in the theater, it's a group moment.
That was so great. My favorite line in that movie, I'm so glad you brought up Spider-Man. My favorite line in that movie was when Electro shows up and Andrew Garfield looks over and Tobey Maguire goes, "What's this guy's deal?" And he goes, he fell into a vat of electric eels. And Tobey Maguire goes, "That'll do it." And that was such, I would love to know the stand-up comedian that was on staff that wrote that fucking joke, because that's great.
In a similar moment, and it hits very close to home for me in that movie, was when they're talking to Tobey Maguire and they ask him about his outfit, and they say, "Are you a really cool youth pastor?" Like, that moment.
That's funny.
Like,
yeah,
I was just like, it's a little too close to home, but because it's real, it makes me laugh. But I love what you said about that with Phantom Menace, with episode 1. It's a communal experience. Even as a 5th grader, like, you recognize, like, this is cool. Like, there's a bunch of people here that are all different, but we're excited about this one same thing together. And that's what Star Wars is. That's what Star Wars should supposed to be. And I think it comes
it's fun.
It's fun. That's right. And that's why I love, in the clip that we used in that promo from one of your podcasts, it was from Screen Door from a while back, where you say, it was from Screen Door. When you say,
I didn't even know we filmed those.
Apparently you did at some point. But you say, and Star Wars Twitter is its own, like, cannibalistic, eat its own, be pissed about whatever the next thing is.
I'm on Reddit in those threads, and oh my God.
Yeah, it's plenty. But in those moments, to be able to go, yeah, I'm a Star Wars fan who loves Star Wars. And that's very rare. Like, that was prophetic when you said that, however many years ago that might have been, because that's rare right now. And that's rare, especially in, I don't know, and we could get into the hypocrisy of, like, we as people demanding people give it to me, give me the thing I want. Like, that's not how art works. Art is subjective, and what you like, I may not like, and what I like, you may not like. And that's how it's supposed to be. And honestly, to even bring it back to, one of the big things that you talk about in your comedy is politics. I may disagree with somebody, but there's a difference between being able to agree to disagree and respectfully have a conversation, and also being the crazy person that just stands there and screams with their fingers in their ears going, "I don't want to hear what you have to say because I'm the only one that's right." Like, that exists in politics, that exists in Star Wars, that exists in Marvel and DC, and every place else where somebody feels invested in something. But when it comes,
we can all agree to disagree until someone starts defending Nazis, and then we got to go, okay. But and hey, Star Wars episode 1, there's a lot of, like, is the Trade Federation good, or what's going on here? Maybe the Empire had some good ideas. I have no idea what. By the way, that right there is another series. So, like, when you go back and you watch Star Wars episode 1 as an adult, now you go, why the fuck did they think that anyone would give a shit about the Trade Federation and the inner workings of the Senate and the politics? But if you think about this in terms of a Disney Plus show, imagine if they did a House of Cards with the Senate from Star Wars. Now that whole movie, if you take Star Wars episode 1 and instead of doing it as a movie, you do it as a 12-part miniseries, and you actually start breaking down and you get into, like, actual Senate policy and stuff like that, and people running, dude, I'm into that. Like, that's solid.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'll do you one maybe better. I don't know, because House of Cards, the one that I have wanted, same trend, same thing, is I want an Aaron Sorkin West Wing Star Wars.
Oh yeah.
I want the West Wing Imperial Senate. That's what I'm here for, because if I've got Deadwood, Justified, and Sopranos as 3 of my 4 on Mount Rushmore, West Wing is number 1 and always will be. I love that show in a way that's hard to explain. So if you give me an Imperial Senate Aaron Sorkin, West Wing, Star Wars, I'll just die happy forever.
And the thing is, you don't even have to get Aaron Sorkin to write it. You just get any screenwriter and go, hey, when you're writing this, could you shove your head completely up your ass while you're doing it? And and by the way, that's coming from someone who is a huge Aaron Sorkin fan, and
Absolutely.
takes
I'm with you completely.
yeah, and like he's one of my biggest inspirations in writing. But when I'm writing, sometimes I'll sit there and go, "You're getting a little Sorkin-y there, ain't you, buddy?" No one would no one would say this for 10 minutes.
Oh,
They would just,
it's phenomenal, and I love. And again, I'm such a sucker for process and behind the scenes that I end up listening to podcasts and reading articles and deep dives and all this stuff. I was listening the other week to the Rob Lowe. There's a Parks and Rec recap podcast that they're doing right now, and he was talking about Parks and Rec versus West Wing, and Aaron Sorkin notoriously doesn't do contractions, and so the script supervisors that are watching on set, if you say hasn't instead of has not, they'll stop and go, you're supposed to say has not, and you're going, what part of, like, it's wild, but also it's part of why I love it so much, is like that attention to detail. And that it's crazy. It's so good.
I always like to think that Rob Lowe's character on Parks and Rec is his character from the West Wing that just left and then ended up going into the Park Service. I always I believe that, and therefore it has to be true. He got an alias, and he got in trouble getting hookers, and he went into some sort of, like, he changed his name, and then he moved to Indiana.
Right. And it goes back to the original, the first episode, the pilot episode is him with, you know, the hooker. So it totally works. It's totally fine. This conversation, this whole big picture conversation has been more than I could have ever imagined, because we've talked about Timothy Oliphant. We've talked about The Sopranos. We've talked about West Wing. We've talked about Star Wars, which is why you came here in the first place. I can't begin to thank you enough for the time to hang out, the time to have this conversation before we get out of here, because I hate to do it, but I can't take away all of your time in beautiful, scenic Helen, Georgia.
Oh, sure you can. Let it rip. I got a fresh beer. We're good.
That's right. You're good. Give us some plugs. Tell people what you're working on that you are allowed to talk about. Tell us where we can find you. Give us the Corey rundown, because I do want people to keep up with you if they're not already, which seems unlikely.
Well, you can find me on all the social medias. If you just, the easiest, I mean, like, I'm probably a different handle on all of them. I think it's normally Corey R. Forrester, but if you Google me, my stuff pops up. If you go to CoreyRyanForrester.com, there's all my things. Some things I can talk about. You promoted the Well-Read Comedy Tour earlier, and I appreciate that. We are taking a little bit of a break. I'm taking the entire summer off to write a book, which is why I'm in Helen right now. It's a travel book that will be available in 2023. So you'll have already forgot it, but I'll be pimping it then. If you follow me on socials, you'll see it. The thing that I'm the most excited about right now is, as I was saying earlier, CoreyWritesForYou.com. That's my it's sort of like, I didn't want to do a Patreon because I wasn't doing, like, I didn't want to do videos and stuff, but I like writing long form. I got frustrated with Twitter because I was like, I got all these things that I want to say, but I don't just want to scream them at my phone. I want to write them down. And so I started writing over there, and you can subscribe for free and get most things. If you pay $5 a month, you get bonus things and audio things. But I also like to say to people, if you are out there and you're like, I would love bonus things and audio things, but I can't afford $5 a month, that's totally cool. If you email me at buttercreamcorey@gmail.com, I will comp you a subscription, no questions asked. Whether you're on strike, you're out of work, or you just had another kid and you can't swing it, I don't want it to be about the money. I have enough people that support me over there that it's a fine life I live. So if it's if you would like it but you can't afford it, I will give it to you, because I am so blessed. I literally play a fake wrestler on the internet as a career almost. I can't. I try to give, whenever I can. So that's something I'm pumped about. In the future, me and Trey Crowder have a new podcast coming out called putting on airs where two hillbillies talk about European history and fancy life. It'll be out. It'll be out April 1st. So follow me on socials for that. But other than that, man, just follow me on the socials. I've always got something going on, and I just appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you for having me, man. This was a joy.
Corey, this has been so much fun. And of course, I've already started building the Nick and Corey Talk About TV Shows podcast. I've already gotten too excited about W. Earl Brown. Like, there's so many things that have come out of this. And all I really wanted to do was talk to you about Star Wars. So this for me has been a true blessing, a true pleasure to get to hang out, to have this conversation. I do want to thank everybody who has hung out with us and watched us live tonight. If you're listening to the audio version, which will drop sometime in the next week or two, thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of this. If you're interested in what I've got going on, you can find me at Will's Pod. If you're interested in at ATGcast, which is me and my buddy Pete and all the different shows that we're working on together, you can go to atgcast.com. You can get Patreon. You can get t-shirts. You can get where to find the shows. We love Star Wars. We love talking about Star Wars. We love getting to talk about people and talk with people who love Star Wars. So this has been truly a great night, and everybody wins by getting the chance to hang out and do this tonight. So thank you for being with us. Thank you most of all to Corey for hanging out. And until we hang out again next time, may the Force be with you always.
May the Force be with you always. And